another episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me as always is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
I'm doing very well, Jody. You sound awfully chipper this morning.
Things are coming together slowly but surely.
Good.
And once things are done being broken and they're on the mend and things are going the other direction, it's always a good feeling.
Yes, and that's a good time to start talking about compressing electric guitars.
It sure is.
That was smooth, wasn't it?
Very, very, very smooth. I like it.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're talking about today, compressing electric guitars and how you and I might go about it, and should we, and all those things. We have talked about this in the past, but there's going to be overlaps. When you're compressing guitars, let me just ask you right off the bat, do you always do it on electric guitars?
No.
No. Me neither. Good. All right. Let's move on to Friday Find. Right. But if you do, though, I mean, in all seriousness, it's easy to joke about this, but what kind of guitars would you reach for a compressor if you were to? Because I know what I would do, but what would you do?
The most obvious is clean electric guitars for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here.
And that's generally where you're going to get strummed or funky type parts or picked and arpeggiated type parts. Clean guitar is well suited to being compressed, so to speak, mainly because with the electric guitar, unlike an acoustic guitar, the sustain of the notes is generally not nearly as robust as it would be on an acoustic guitar. And compressing helps bring some robustness back to your clean guitar parts.
Oh, interesting, because you and I are apparently thinking about it in different ways.
Okay.
I was going to say, because my thought on clean guitars is more that compared to a distorted guitar, it actually has a dynamic range.
Oh, it does.
So for me, I think
the attack is very present in a clean guitar, and then it dies off pretty quick.
Can be, depending on the tone. But to me, it's I think of it more as on the attack front as opposed to adding body and longevity to the note, or sustain to the note.
Okay.
So, but I mean, it does both, right? It's just, but the mindset is there slightly differently for you and I guess. I mean, I mentioned distorted guitars there, and for me, very, very rarely would I use compression on a distorted guitar, just because that dynamic range isn't there.
I agree with that.
And the same thing that you just said as far as like the sustain thing, that's usually not a problem on distorted guitars.
Very much
because
so.
they tend to like ring forever. The only case I would actually use it would be if it's either like a special effect, I just want it like hyper compressed as an effect more than it to sit in a mix or something. Or sometimes when, let's say it's a lead line or you have like a busy picking part, sometimes the pick noise can be a little bit obnoxious. And sometimes a little compression on that can sort of help that out a little bit.
I agree.
Yeah, distorted guitars, I usually don't, because there simply isn't any need to. And I've learned that the hard way too, because there were times in the past where I'd be mixing some stuff and trying to get impact out of the guitar, and I'm like, oh, it's not happening, and I'm just having more and more compression and more dead. And you realize, well, maybe I shouldn't be compressing this. And sure enough, that's kind of how I learned not to do that, right? But it's also, I mean, when you listen to it, or even if you just look at the waveform.
Don't even point at it.
Yeah, we're done pointing now. When you look at the waveform, you see that there's no dynamic range. So there's very, very little reason to distort that. But what about when you have guitars that are sort of in between there, like another Spinal Tap reference, like Lukewarm Water?
Slightly driven guitars, you mean?
Yes.
If I do compress them, and it can happen, I'm not compressing much. If I were to rank them in order of how much I'm compressing things when I do
don't get too much in detail, because I want to go in a little bit more and dig deeper into these as we move on. Suffice to say that with overdriven, slightly breaking up guitars, you can sometimes reach for a compressor on those.
Yes.
What you're saying.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm with you right there. I'm with you right there. Let's dig in then, shall we?
All right.
Let's start with clean guitars.
All right.
You mentioned a couple of styles, and as everything here is, it's going to be style dependent and the parts dependent on what kind of stuff that we're dealing with. And some of the things that you mentioned as well, is like with the sustain and things, like we talked about just a couple of episodes ago on like episode 236, how to kind of listen for compression and the effect. So it might be a good thing to run through that again. Back to clean guitars. Let's say that you have a picked part that you have, like an arpeggiated type of a thing. What's your mindset about that? Do you have a favorite compressor that you would go to for when you do this kind of compression?
Ooh, I would probably be reaching for an 1176.
Okay.
In terms of a setting, I don't know if there's necessarily a favorite in terms of settings. Now, that one is already a very fast compressor in and of itself.
Sure.
So I'm usually going with a quote unquote slower attack dial on that because it's already pretty darn quick. And I will usually have it set for a fairly fast release so it's not super pumpy, I guess is a good way of saying it, or it doesn't let go too slow for the next pick attack, depending on how quick your tempo is and how fast this part particularly is.
Well, let's say that we have like an eighth note kind of part. Obviously, when we're talking about settings here, I'm thinking, and you are too, it is very dependent on the part. And it's like, well, what's musically a good way of having it sound, right? What's an appropriate setting? And it's less than, oh, I always set it to 2, you know. It's, as far as gain reduction, how much are you looking for there, or how much are you listening for?
I usually just kiss it at about 1 to 1.5 dB of compression. It's not a lot. And I think the reason why I don't do it is this is very specific based on an actual channel. If I'm doing it that way, if I'm working in a channel strip setup, like with the SSL, there's going to be maybe a little compression going before the 1176 anyway. And it's not going to be much there either. As it goes in stages, I'm generally doing a much slower attack initially. And as it goes down the line, if there's more than one compressor happening, the next compressor has a slightly faster
So
attack.
Take care of any peaks that might have been missed. Like
Yes.
Slower, kind of like, okay.
Yes. Generally speaking, it's never more than 2. Some rare instances, there might be 3. But you're talking about the channel strip being the first line of defense. And then maybe below that channel strip in the DAW, I will have the 1176. It's not highly likely. It's usually going to the bus, to the guitar bus. And there will be an 1176, generally speaking, to take care of all the guitars at one go from the individuals. But that's not how we're talking about it right now. So in terms of the channel strip, depending on whether it's the API or it's the SSL or the Focusrite or whatever it is that I choose to use that has probably built-in compression, I'm just kissing it. It's very little. I don't use a ton of compression unless it's for a special effect. But I don't do a lot of special effect compression on guitars myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you when it comes to the channel strip compressor. And I find that sometimes that's all it needs. If it doesn't, I may bypass the channel strip compressor, and like you, I would go for an 1176, just because for my money, I kind of want it to be really fast and kind of just even stuff out pretty aggressively, as long as it's musically, appropriate, of course. Again, I would kind of go with like a little bit of a faster approach. And again, depends on the tempo of the song, right? So
Yes.
It's frustrating, to describe this because of like that. There's so many variables, right, that go into it. If it needs to, I'm not afraid here to do more than a couple of dB of compression.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not afraid to do it either. most of the time, if I've been the recording engineer and then I end up being the mix engineer on a song, I'm going to have recorded those guitars hopefully in a manner that isn't going to require heavy-handed
Sure.
more than 2 or 3 dB of compression. Have I done it? Sure. Do I need to do it often? No. And as you mentioned earlier, the more you start to compress things, the more they start to die.
Yes. It's very good chance that if you're too heavy-handed, you're killing the patient, right? It's like it loses all life, as we talked about before. If you over squash that, if you have too long of a release, whatever it is, it's just squashing it. Sometimes if it's just going to sit in the mix, it's not like a major part of the song, that might be good.
Mhm.
More often than not, I wouldn't be surprised to get like 5 dB of compression. Again, depends on the part, depends on how dynamic the part is, of course. If it's a steady eighth note that I mentioned before, that might be overdoing it because you really run the risk of just kind of sucking all the life out of it.
Yep. I
But
don't disagree.
there you go. But I'm a fan of this 1176 in that kind of situation as well.
Mhm.
Let's say that we have a part that is, instead of just like a straight arpeggiated thing, maybe it's something like a U2, the Edge type of a thing, where we got this,
Ping-pongy
playing with
multi-delays.
Exactly, the dotted eighth delay thing and everything is going on. So here, I'm not afraid to really squash a little bit more because now at this point, I'm looking to get a really even response from not just the straight guitar, the amp guitar, but also the delay.
Mhm.
So I want this to be almost like one uniform thing. I find that if there's too much dynamic going on in the guitar performance, you get the echoes of the delay, so that can tend to almost like make it sound sloppy
And
if it's not like
chaotic.
super even. Yeah. Here I'm not afraid to squash stuff again, but of course you go above a certain reduction and you're not creating a sound anymore. You're just kind of killing the signal.
I hear
But
you.
here, for my money, again, it would be like an 1176 type of a compressor.
Mhm.
Not only on the guitar itself, but I will more than likely have something on a bus where I'm summing that with the delay also.
I don't disagree.
Yeah. In that case, on the bus, it's probably not going to be an 1176. It's probably going to be something like an LA2A or something.
Ooh.
So,
Okay.
yeah. Just because at that point, I find that it's already even enough, but I just want to kind of squeeze together the delay and
Gotcha.
the clean guitar part as
Yep.
well to kind of do that.
Yep.
What about you? If you have something like that, what do you do? Very similar, I'm guessing, but
Yes. I might not just grab the LA2 though. I might grab, actually I take that back. I do grab the LA2. In other instances, I might grab the API 2500 though. That's a real nice bus compressor as well. And as well, the SSLG bus compressor is good for gluing things like those together.
Sure. Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I mean, it could be any number of things. So if all you have is like a stock DAW compressor, it's going to do the job just fine. Just paying attention to the
attack and release
all this
and
kind
how
of
much
stuff.
you're actually compressing and all those things that are so good to know.
Yeah. A nice sort of like in between compressor there is something I've been exploring a little bit more recently, but it's actually the LA3, which is in the past the compressor that I generally wouldn't reach for. I find that it's a little bit faster than the LA2.
Yeah.
Without being like an 1176. So that's kind of a cool one to try there as well.
Sort of like the hybrid between the 1176 and the LA2, isn't it?
Right? Because it's not the same circuitry and it's not the tubes as well. So it's a little bit faster. So worth experimenting with.
When it comes to strumming clean guitar parts, and if it's a busy rhythmic part, what do you do?
Here, I would generally leave off an 1176. And my first port of call here is probably the channel strip compressor. I wanted to take care of peaks and even out a performance or whatever. Here, I would probably go like with a LA2A or maybe the aforementioned just LA3 here, just to kind of squish it all together a little bit more. I might leave, well, any one of those is not going to have a control for the release setting, but if I'm dealing with a stock compressor, I might have a little bit of a longer release time here just to kind of keep it all in check if it's a strummy type of a thing, as a busy rhythmic part, if you will. But if I have ringing chords, I would definitely have as long of a release as I can.
Sure.
On the compressor, just so that it doesn't start pumping or anything. The attack there is probably a bad idea to use an 1176 because you might just get that really sharp attack and it might sound unnatural. So here again, I'm going with a slower attack type of a thing with a LA3 or LA2A. Gotcha. What about you? What about you with those?
In terms of busy rhythmic parts, I'm going to use a compressor that is less precise on the attack, much like you just mentioned. In other words, it's not so much a short attack. The idea usually on busy rhythmic parts on clean guitars, you want that attack to hopefully be generally more even, unless there's some really obvious accents going on through there. You don't want to kill those. The LA2 is really great for that.
Yeah. The only exception I would say to that is I contradict myself, but if I have, let's say it's a funky part. So it's really like a James Brown or even like a Prince type of a funk guitar part. It might be appropriate with an 1176, just so you can kind of get a little bit of that snap of the attack.
Yeah. But that's funk, baby. Funk.
That's funk. So there's that. But we were talking about strumming, but then I'm thinking about more open, strummy cowboy chords kind of thing to kind of keep those in line.
Yeah.
And then
for me, with ringing chords, I'm going to go with a Distressor generally.
Yeah. I would say a Distressor I could probably substitute for all the choices that I've made so far. Because
it's an amazing compressor. There's no question about it, but it does long, ringy things really well.
Yeah. I mean, it's been said before, but it really is such like a Swiss Army knife of compressors. And if I were not so spoiled for choice as I happen to be, but if I just had to choose one, that would
the Distressor would be it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you can do the super fast stuff. You could do the slower attack stuff. You could, and everything in between you could. And just a nuke mode, man.
Oof.
But you don't want to do that on funky guitar parts, probably. No, a lot of good stuff going on there. What about overdriven guitars? Obviously dependent on style, Jody, right? When would you reach for compression on an overdriven style guitar?
It's rare, actually, for me. Unless something has been recorded extremely poorly and then things need to be clamped down, so to speak. But as you mentioned earlier, and as we've mentioned in episodes past, the distortion in and of itself ends up being a bit of a natural style compressor. So it's not often when things get ridiculously out of control with distorted guitars.
Instead of saying overdriven, let's say that it's sort of like a tone that's kind of just like breaking up. It's kind of like maybe it's more of like a Bryan Adams-y type of a thing, or maybe even more of like a blues thing. The
couple of choices that I would probably think about in this instance might be the Fatso compressor, which is kind of a two-type thing because it's not so much compression as it is hardware representation of tape saturation along with some dynamic control in it. And that's an interesting one to use. And as mentioned with the clean guitars, I would go with a Distressor in this situation more often than not. Slower attacks that are more even keeled, unless the part is meant to be machine gun style. And then if it's machine gun style, I'm grabbing more like an 1176.
Just slam down on that bad boy.
Yeah, but it's not often that's
submission.
needed to be done in terms of distorted guitars.
No, this is true. I mean, I'm thinking here, The only time I would feel the need to use any kind of compression is we're talking about like it's necessarily a chordal or a riff based type of part. If it is something that has maybe like a picked line or something in it, along with, maybe some ringing chords or whatever, sometimes the performance there can be such that some of the pick attacks just stick out a little too hard.
Yeah.
And in those cases, it would be one of those where you're taming a little bit. And here, I'm definitely with what you said on the clean guitars up top. Like, you don't want to squash these too much. And here, I'm thinking, hopefully it works, but just like 2 or 3 dB tops, just to kind of get those hits. I'm with you. I could go with the Distressor here, but I might go for like a LA2A or like an Opto style or something as well. Assuming that's not a super fast pick part, but it probably wouldn't be with that kind of tone. Yeah, squeezing it in and what's the saying? Like making it sound like a record, right?
Gluing it together.
Yeah.
Gluing it together.
So now another thing to keep into consideration though here is depending on if it's a mic'd up cab or if it's using an amp sim, but if it is a mic'd up cab, compression might already be a part of the player's signal path, right? So that it might already be a part of his pedal board or his rack or whatever that he's going through.
Yep.
That might already be baked in. Hopefully the player knows how to kind of control those dynamics as well when you're doing it. So there might not be a need for it at all.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah, again, anything that has a little bit of overdrive to it, some semblance of distortion will definitely get less treated with me.
As you mentioned a couple of times here, you talk about pick attacks and picking and being more focused on that aspect of things. There is one type of compression that can help with this without really harming the rest of the signal, and that's a multi-band compressor, which is more of an Andy Sneap trick, if you haven't heard of that guy. You can set it so that the compressor is working on the frequency range of where the pick attacks are happening, and that can leave a lot of the rest of the signal alone, really kind of focus itself on the pick attacks. And that's a nice way to be gentle on the rest of the signal when you're being harsh on the attacks. Yeah.
So we're kind of like mining into a territory here where we might have to do like an entire
whole
episode on like multi-band type of stuff. Just to veer off into that a little bit more, for me, I think of that technique, if people that don't know, Andy Sneap is a very well-known and successful metal mix engineer and producer. The technique there that he tends to use is like to focus on a band when you're doing like heavy palm muting with super distorted guitars, when it can just get really, really boomy, right? So that's how to kind of control that. I'd be remiss again to say that if you have those like pick attacks, not necessarily distortion, but if go like the split EQ or something as well.
Sure, you do that, but that's really not compression now, is it?
No, it isn't. So there's a whole lot of gray area here.
Right. Do you have a favorite compressor?
Yeah, I do. I have to say, well, do I get 3? I'm going to say 3.
Okay.
1176. And a lot of times I end up using the blue stripe for whatever reason. But I think it's a little bit more like mid-range forward, and it just kind of works best for me for like on guitars or vocals or whatever. But we're talking guitars today. That would be one. And I have to say an LA2A as well, because it just does such a good job. If I mention the third one, you already know what it's going to be, but it's going to be the Distressor.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. But any one of those, if you had to really twist my arm, I guess I would go with the Distressor.
Okay.
What about you?
I've mentioned at least 6 today, I think, on the podcast. And they're all ones that I grabbed from any given moment. The ones in recent remixes that I've been doing that I've used the most would be the 1176, the Distressor, the LA2.
Do I sense a theme here?
There is. And then on top of that, with channel strips, the SSL, the G-Bus. And if it's an API mix that I've been doing, it's the 2500. I stick to that kind of vibe of that's the company whose products I'm trying to use, and then occasionally pepper some other things in. And the Distressor and the Fatso.
Yeah.
There's just so
But-
many nice ones to choose from for different purposes. I really do dig the Distressor and the Fatso really a lot on bass. The Distressor I've used on multiple different things, but Fatso is great on bass for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's so much you can do. But like you said, the one on the SSL console, just that the SSL compressor is great.
Mhm.
So it's not like you always have to do that. It just comes down to workflow, I guess. But we definitely are spoiled for choice today when it comes to this stuff. But I guess it's just thinking about, again, like attack and release and what that imparts on the sound and choosing the compressor accordingly.
In terms of more spoiled for choice, what have you got for our Friday finds this week, Chris?
Well, the company of the week is SSL. We mentioned that a lot. The X delay from SSL. This is such a wonderful problem to have. I hadn't messed with it, and I have it. Right? It's a really, really cool delay unit. It has 4 independent delay lines that you can do tempo sync them. You can have them just free flowing to just milliseconds. You can pan each delay wherever you want it, not so that it bounces around. You can have it as ping pong, but you have control. Let's say that you can have delay number 1 line going left or center or whatever. Has built-in filters. It's a great sounding delay. That's my Friday find this week, the SSL X delay. What have you got?
UA last week, as I mentioned, dropped a whole bunch of new stuff. Not
They
only
did.
hardware, but also software. And I did mention one last week. I'm mentioning another this week. That is their Lion 68, which was a hardware pedal prior to last week, but it is now also a software piece as well. The Lion 68 is UA's recreation of a Marshall Super Lead guitar amp. Not only do you get the amp head, you get cabinet, you get mic choices. So now you can play the UA FX Lion 68 pedal as a plug-in.
Ooh,
For
so it's
guitar
more
players.
from a head to a pedal to software.
Yeah.
Nice. Very
Wow.
cool.
While we've got your attention, we ask that you go to InsideTheRecordingStudio.com and sign up for our mailing list. You'll need to be on our email list in order to be eligible for any future giveaways, and we'll make sure you don't miss any future episodes of this insanely cool podcast. Send us an email at goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at InsideTheRecordingStudio.com with the word electric, and you'll get something cool back in your inbox. If you have a topic or suggestion for Chris and I to explain in a future episode, contact us at the contact page and we'll put it into consideration for a future episode. With that, I'll say see you next week.
See you later, Jody. Thanks for listening, everybody.